A Global Conflict, Vodcast 5, World War I. The aims of this vodcast are for students to be able to describe the spread of the conflict, to identify how governments established wartime economies, and finally to summarize the U.S. entry into the war. A global conflict. As presented in Vodcast 4, Germany faced a two-front war. However, World War I was much more than a European war as other countries joined the fight. Also, each side looked beyond Europe to help end the stalemate. Ottoman Empire, the Gallipoli Campaign. The goal of the Allies was to eventually take Constantinople and defeat the Turks. First, they needed to secure the Dardanelles. This would allow them to establish a supply line to Russia through the Bosporus Strait and the Black Sea. The Gallipoli Campaign. Efforts to take the Dardanelles began in February 1915. British, Australian, New Zealand, and French troops made repeated assaults on the western side of the Gallipoli Peninsula. Turks, some commanded by the Germans, defended the region. The Gallipoli campaign continued. Both sides dug trenches and it became another bloody stalemate. Over 250,000 casualties occurred. By December 1915, the Allies gave up and began evacuating the area. Battles in Africa and Asia. Germany's colonies came under attack. The Japanese quickly overran Germany's holdings in China and in the Pacific. The English and French attacked Germany's 4 African possessions, managing to seize control of 3. The British and French recruited subjects of their territories. These subjects fought on the battlefields or helped supply the front lines. America joins the fight. Several events brought the U.S. into World War I. Sinking of the Lusitania. The Germans sank the British passenger ship RMS Lusitania on May 7, 1915, killing 128 U.S. citizens. President Woodrow Wilson asked the Germans to stop its policy of unrestricted submarine warfare. Germany eventually agreed to stop the policy. However, Germany returned to the use of unrestricted submarine warfare, and German U-boats sank 3 U.S. ships. Zimmermann Telegraph. U.S. officials intercept a telegraph written by Germany's Foreign Secretary, Arthur Zimmermann. This telegraph stated that Germany would help Mexico reconquer land it had lost to the U.S. if Mexico would ally itself with Germany. This was the last straw for the U.S. On April 2, 1917, President Woodrow Wilson asked Congress to declare war on Germany. Total war. A wartime economy. A total war is a war in which a country devotes all its resources to the war effort. In Britain, Germany, Austria-Hungary, Russia, and France, the entire force of government was dedicated to winning the war. Government took control of the economy, told factories what to produce and how much. In fact, many factories were asked just to produce items for the war effort. Every able-bodied person was put to work, and governments turned to rationing. These items ranged from shoes to butter. Propaganda. Anti-war activity was suppressed. News reports about the war were censored. Governments used propaganda, or one-sided information designed to persuade, to keep up morale and support for the war. Women and the war. Since the men were off fighting, women were needed to work in the factories. Women built tanks and munitions, plowed fields, paved streets, and ran hospitals. Women would also work near the front lines as nurses. Most of the women left the workforce when the war ended. However, it helped change views in what women were capable of doing. This concludes Global Conflict, Vodcast 5, World War I. To recap, the aims of this vodcast were for students to be able to describe the spread of the conflict, to identify how governments established wartime economies, and to summarize the U.S. entry into the war.